there's an element of this team rather that has reached the end of its cycle. And you look at Brendan Rodgers' squad, and most of his players, most of the best players he's got are Ange's players.
I was raging at it. It was a simple pass, and Johnston just looks over and goes, calm down. And I looked up, it was 70 odd minutes on the clock, and we've barely had a shot on target against the bottom of the league team, and I'm being told by somebody to calm down.
There's been an attitude that is, we're going to win the treble, no bother, why do we need to try here?
Do Celtic have a mentality problem? That's this week on 20 Minute Tims. I'm your host Jamie, and I'm joined by Stephen.
Hello.
And Martin Melly.
Yes, I'm here, and yes to the question you posed.
Listen, Celtic.
Thanks for watching and listening. We'll be back next week.
One final point, Celtic, stop losing football games. Stephen, you're laughing.
Yeah.
We're only laughing on Sunday.
No, it's a funny old second part of the season, isn't it? It's quite hard to...
Not funny, Stephen.
No, well, and a curious one then is maybe a better word for it. It's quite a difficult one to get a hold of because ultimately Celtic are going to have what is by any stretch of the imaginations, by any normal standards, a successful season. But I can't help but feel that it's tinged with some sort of weird disappointment because of how much it's fizzling out. And I think since January, certainly since Celtic went out of the Champions League, I think there's been a definite lull in Celtic's performances, and it is leading to a little bit of general malaise towards. And what I mean by that is we should be building something here. We should be a full-on charge towards another historic treble. It just doesn't feel like that for some reason. Don't get me wrong, it's not...
Because we're playing absolutely shite.
There's
probably something to do with it.
There's definitely that. Don't get me wrong, this is not an outright crisis or anything like that. It just, for whatever reason, feels like, even temporarily, and we can get into the reasons why we think that might be, or whether it is maybe something a wee bit more longer term and something that needs worked on, but the spark seems to have gone from Celtic a little bit in certainly the last 2 or 3 months of the season.
Just when you were saying there, Celtic are on for a successful season, it's getting to the point now, for me anyway, that if we were to lose to Rangers again, is it a successful season?
Yeah.
Look, we talk about this treble as if it's kind of already won. The team we've got to face in the semi-final is the team that just beat us at the weekend, and then we'll have another game after that. So you've spoke about it recently, Jamie, saying you don't just get to turn it on. So Celtic can't just pick and choose. Right, we'll be all right. Semi-final, we'll turn it on. If we win that, final, we'll turn it on then. This is a problem. It's a pattern now that's emerging for Celtic that is really, really poor.
Brendan Rodgers has got a job in his hands, getting these players to turn around. And he said that himself. He said after the game, he was talking about the players' mentality, and he says a lot of them are too comfortable and I don't like it. And I've seen Brendan Rodgers getting a lot of stick. He's been copping it, and we'll probably get to some of that. And I've seen some of the players have been copping it, and there's definitely a list of names here that we probably want to talk about. But I think overall, the players' attitude to these games since the league was won has been appalling.
The league's not even won.
The league's not won, you're right. But ever since the league was won, it's appalling. The players sort of... Celtic are a big club, whether you like it or not, right? But Celtic are a big club, and they get paid big club wages, these players. And along with that comes big club mentality and big club pressure. And all these things go hand in hand. And as Brendan Rodgers is fond of saying, the wages are in the bank every single month.
Yep.
Yeah.
Every month, these players' massive wages are in the bank. They're getting paid a lot more at Celtic than they were at their previous clubs because this is a big club and everything that comes along with it. And when you're at big clubs, you don't just get to play until we've kind of won the league now, we can put our feet up. Half these guys are on the beach already. Some players I'm quite surprised at their application in the last couple of games. But what's really pissed me off the most is they kind of don't care. Melly, you were at the game and you'd said on the post-match podcast, which is something we do on Patreon for every game, you said that Alistair Johnston was copping it for the stand and he was telling the fans, calm down a wee bit. No, because this is not really how it works. You don't get to say, calm down, we won the league in December, because fans don't get a rebate on their season ticket when you go 13 points clear. The direct debits don't stop coming out when you go 13 points clear. That's not really how it works. That was some people's... I don't want to sound trite, okay? But that game pissed me off so much because you were there, we were doing podcast stuff for it. That's some people's whole weekend. And the Celtic players need to very quickly understand that just because they think the league is won, that's not the way playing for Celtic works for so many reasons. But the main reason is those massive wages that land in your bank every month. That's people's whole weekend. They work 5 days a week. A lot of that money goes to supporting Celtic. As we've already mentioned, higher proportion of any of your pay packets, talking to the players here,
yeah,
the fans pay out to support Celtic. Hundreds of pounds, some of them are paid to go to Perth. And you turn that in. That's their whole weekend. They sit in on a Saturday, they go to the football on the Sunday. That's how, and then they're back to work on Monday. And it's just, I know that sort of working man fan stuff is a bit trite, but honestly, that was my main takeaway. These fans can't, these players look as if they can't be arsed, a lot of them.
And of course, your ticket fee doesn't buy you the guarantee of a win. It doesn't buy you that. But what it does buy you is what it should buy you rather, is a minimum level of application that we expect from a Celtic player, and 2, an opinion on what you've just seen. So you do get to say what you think about that afterwards. I know a lot of people will be sort of okay with everything that's generally going on because Celtic are on the brink potentially, and you're right to point out that it's far from one yet, of a treble. But to me, there just feels like an unacceptable level of lethargy, of laziness that has crept into the general Celtic way of life just now. And we're not the only ones saying it. Brendan Rodgers is out there telling you about how the mentality isn't good enough. And that's very rare for a Celtic team, because do you remember, must be only 2 years ago, so do you remember that game at St Mirren, that really absolutely pathetic performance, which came absolutely out of nowhere under Ange, where he made a couple of changes. It was in that grey strip, and we were all thinking that was terrible. What happened there? See, after that point, they won 25 of their next 27 league games. The only draws in there were a 2-2 at Ibrox and a 1-1 at home to Motherwell. After that point, the league was done, and then the foot came off the gas a wee bit, and we started losing games hilariously to Hibs and all that. Remember that disaster? So at that point, and basically throughout our entire Celtic supporting lives, certainly the lifespan of the podcast, we've been talking about Celtic as absolute mentality monsters. What a winning machine, putting together all these runs. And now we've got to a point where we're giving them excuses like, but they're too far ahead, they're tired. Again, don't get me wrong, I know that this season is somewhat unique in that we don't have a January break, and therefore what we're maybe seeing, and this is football wide, is the consequence, the result of what happens when the beaks, the people in charge of football, compromise the players' sort of ability for just more football. You throw more football into the mix, and what you maybe get out the end of it is knackered players in a substandard quality. That might be what we're seeing. So we're in kind of unprecedented territory here. But overall, Celtic need to be better than that, and we need to move away, or rather move back to thinking of Celtic as this relentless, unstoppable winning machine. I'm not talking about every game, but I'm talking about the mindset. I'm talking about the attitude of the players. We can see that players want to win this and want to achieve history and want to put another treble. We can't be falling into the trap of thinking trebles are just boring and routine and an eye roll now. We just do that. It's felt like since January there's been an attitude that is, we're going to win the treble, no bother. Why do we need to try here?
Yeah, I have a lot of problems with yesterday's performance and everything. There was a lot of results over the weekend that maybe show evidence what you're saying there, Stephen, that teams lost, but those teams have got big European games coming up, and as well, if you're looking at the Premier League, Liverpool lost and all that, and but there might be reasons behind that. But for Celtic, for me, we've sat here over the years, and
can I just ask you this point about playing in Europe, no January break? What about all the teams that are overperforming that didn't have European football, like Dundee United and all that sort of stuff? These teams that are performing really well, really strongly toward Hibs, they didn't have European football, but they didn't have the European break either. They didn't have the January break either. I get what you're saying, and I get the examples of it, but I think that's just I honestly think that's a cop out. I just don't. I don't think that is.
All I'm doing there is I'm trying desperately not to make the excuses. I'm just presenting some of the evidence that should form the whole case against it, the case for the prosecution, as it were here, or the defence, as it were. But I do think you mentioned Liverpool there. Just a further thing on that is very similar conversations are happening about Liverpool at the moment as well. This is not just a Celtic bad thing. There's a lot going on. I've listened to several podcasts since the weekend that make the point that Liverpool's season was promising to be one thing, and it will still be a successful season. It's just that they've taken the foot off the gas. The spark has gone in a very similar way to Celtic, and now they find themselves having a successful, but the context of it is it's quite disappointing season because they've taken the foot off the gas because there's no jeopardy in the league, and they've gone out of two competitions as a result of it. They're disappointed in the Champions League and the Cup. That's not going to happen to Celtic because there's only one competition left to play for, and it just so happens that Celtic are the overwhelming favourites basically every game that they play in these competitions. That doesn't mean it's a given by any stretch of the imagination. But just to make the Liverpool point is that it's not just we're living in a bubble focusing negatively on Celtic. This is something that other pundits outside of the whole Glasgow Goldfish Bowl are talking about in football, that when teams look like they have lost that drive towards the end of a season, how it's no disappointing, because as I said, the season is still going to be successful, but there's something hollow about watching it fizzle out to nothing.
You're right. Because it's more than it's week to week. We've criticised people on this podcast before, Melly, of saying, well, if you don't follow the week to week, just meet us up at the end of the season and we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
We follow the football week to week. You pay to go to football week to week. You pay a new experience every 90 minutes. You're with the fans, the supporters, sorry. You're with the players there for every 90 minutes. It's no fair, and it sounds trite, but it's no fair for the players to turn up and just not give their... We're all here, we've all got dressed, we've all turned up to watch yous play football. We want to see our team maintain the standards that has been built, and you might have theoretically won the league in November, but you've still got a job. I mean, you've still got a job to do.
Aye, it's their job if you want to get
literally
Roy Keane
their
on
job, aye.
And this is this mentality issue, and this. I left the house at 9:30 yesterday and get home at 4:30. That's my day gone. Yeah. My mood in the evening wasn't very good, and
that's the whole thing knackered.
Yeah, that's the whole thing knackered. But looking at that, I gave up my time, and I do that to go to watch the football. I'm not expecting them to show up every week, but it wasn't easy for me to get there. It wasn't easy to sit in traffic, go into that game, and then stand there and watch players like their manager come out and saying after the game they were too comfortable. Why? Why are they too comfortable? They haven't won this league. They've not sealed it. They had a chance again that Rangers have dropped points to go out and push on so that Celtic can go and win the league in front of the home fans next week. If a lot of players are too comfortable, okay, I'm looking at the squad. We brought in Maeda, we brought in Bernardo, Engels, Trusty. We made about 5 or 6 signings in the summer. None of those guys have won a treble. That should be the reinvigoration for the squad. Some guys can go, we've won trebles here. I want some of that. But I don't see that from them. And this mentality thing, Celtic went out last 2024, lost 2 games in the calendar year. This year we've lost a lot more, and I was having a look at it last night in my fury. Celtic have went behind in 6 games this calendar year. They've lost every single one of them.
Wow.
Some of them, the Aston Villa game and the Bayern Munich home game, Celtic Park game, but the rest are domestic games. That's not good enough. That is simply... So if you get the first goal against Celtic, you get a victory.
But I'd love to know what everyone's saying the players have done really well. They've had a remarkable season, and have they?
Season lasts until the last game.
Remarkable 4 months up until the turn of the year, and then that's it.
And then in the space of December, you eked through a cup final against Rangers and you got a trophy about it, a terrible Rangers team, and then you've lost back-to-back against Rangers twice, which is a massive part of the season. And as Melly said, Celtic are racking up the defeats like you don't really are used to seeing, and that's a remarkable stat about no coming back. I after Rangers, I stuck it to Brendan a wee bit about the Rangers result. I thought that was unacceptable, and I thought it was a Brendan problem, that one. But I think this overall malaise, I'm struggling not to blame the players because, the players and other factors around. Because when I'm looking at some players, Nicholas Kuhn is a player we've spoken about a lot, and I was speaking about Nicholas Kuhn months ago, and I was getting stick for it, and now everyone's came to my point of view.
Well. If it isn't the general public coming crawling back...
Let me hear it, Stephen.
We see you, general public.
Thank you very much. No, in all seriousness, but that I was trying to remember, when have I seen a Celtic player so blatantly down tools? That guy's been hooked at half time 2 in the last 3 games, and arguably probably shouldn't have started against Hearts on his current form. But Brendan Rodgers gave him a chance to go out and prove himself. Played okay.
That's why you can put it onto Brendan Rodgers, can't you? Because a lot of these players. That Rangers game we spoke about it. Like Kuhn did all right against Hearts, but there should have been a consequence for him putting in that performance. There wasn't. He comes in, does all right in the next game, and then what happens if I don't play well? Oh, I'll still play. No. So he comes into this game.
Well, what I would say to that is the consequence was Brendan Rodgers goes, look, you've got the opportunity to go and make that right, and he could turn around and say, well, I did go and make it right in the next game, and then very quickly reverted back to reverted back. But I think, well, you're right, and it proves my point. One good game in a year, and I was trying to think back. Everyone's like, oh, the guy's got to move. We were talking about this on the Friday phone in, Stephen. It was a fortnightly Q&A that you can get on patreon.com/20minutetims. It's everyone's just already assuming the guy's got a move lined up.
Aye.
On the account of how blatantly he seems to have down tools.
Body language, yeah.
But I'm going to put it the other way. Out of Kuhn's whole Celtic career, right, he's had a good 4 months, but he's been here, over a year now? Maybe this is Nicholas Kuhn. This looks like Nicholas Kuhn of last year. But some of the stuff that he was doing in the St Johnstone game was pathetic.
Yeah.
Like
what was it? Chris Boyd said something about I know the worst person you know made a good point. He said something about his wisdom tooth getting put back in.
He must have had his wisdom teeth put back in. Some of this, in one particular instance, I saw he couldn't get by that fullback. Who honestly, Nicholas Kuhn probably gets paid about 10 times as much as that guy does. He couldn't get by. He couldn't get by the fullback. At one point, he cuts inside, passes the ball in midfield. Then I watched Nicholas to see what he did after, and he was like gesticulating with his hands as if to say, "Where's my help?"
Naming him and everything. You really are angry.
He's like, "Where's my help, Nicholas? You are the help. You are the guy. We're giving it to you." But I think that's part of the problem, Melly. I think a lot of these players do you know what? DAIZEN will score eventually. Nicholas will score eventually. Jota will do something for us eventually.
Yeah, there's a bit of passing the buck, and it's damning on Kuhn that the manager seen at half time. Well, I spoke about this on the at the match as well. Like, the manager decided at half time he's not worth keeping on. He's not going to turn this around because Nicholas Kuhn's a better player than the guy he's up against. But the manager, for me, is questioning his desire then. Yeah. You've not got it in you to turn this around. I've seen this before a couple of weeks ago. You're not going to be able to turn this around. I'd be as well taking you off at half time. Half time against St Johnstone. That is absolutely pathetic. And a couple of weeks ago at Ibrox, that the penny has to drop at some point. And
Celtic Park.
We do look at Nicholas Kuhn's career and go, why has he fallen from these clubs and got there? So he's at an age now where he's a first-team player. He should be in there. He was on for Player of the Year, and the only person that stopped him is him, because DAIZEN Maeda kind of came out of nowhere, really, didn't he? He's always been playing well, but he's just burst onto the scene recently. If Kuhn had been playing at 70% of what he was doing at the start of the season, he'd be cantering this Player of the Year. But he's chosen to go down a different path, and it's unacceptable at Celtic, and that sort of fed into the... I can blame Nicholas Kuhn, but I also thought Rodgers got the substitution wrong in taking for the player he brought on for him. I thought Yang was a terrible move to bring on for him, but there could have been 2 subs at half time. There could have been many, many more.
Stephen, when you're looking across the pitch and you're trying to figure out, like, well, who are the players that I feel are most letting us down? And when I say letting us down, I just think there's players here who've lost that bit of spark, that bit of... And I can understand, my natural inclination is to go, do you know what, you can kind of understand, like, if there's not as much to fight for. But then I need to remember, I'm not an elite level sportsman at a top European club getting paid millions of pounds a year. That's in fact in many ways why I am not to that, because I have the mentality that just allows me to switch off.
It's the only reason.
It's the only reason. And
if you're at Celtic, surely you don't want Celtic to be your last stop. If you're a professional athlete, you see Celtic, most of these guys, maybe bar Callum McGregor and Luke McCowan, your likes would say, I want to be beyond this, and that's fine. But what you need to do is go out and perform consistently for Celtic.
Part of the problem is a lot of these guys probably know that doesn't matter. They probably know their agents have got enough contacts and enough clips.
I'm not sure in this day and age if that's the case.
Maybe not. But see, when I was talking there about players who have I think are letting us down, I think Alistair Johnson's another one. I'm surprised at his application in some of these games. A real lack of quality, a real lack of application. It's just, and again, it's quite shocking because AJ was a player you could always hang your hat on.
Yeah, I think that's the main problem. Of course, we can get the scattergun out here. You can pick out any number of players. DAIZEN Maeda aside, because he has been...
Jota as well, I think, is free from criticism.
Yeah, it was all right at the weekend, I thought, and he has come up with some goals. I think he's got 4 goals and about 10 appearances or whatever it is since he's been back. So I think he deserves a pass, and it was always a case of getting him gradually more and more fit and more up to speed. Right, so that's fine. Leaving him aside, what I'm not doing is singling out DAIZEN as the only pass mark of the entire season. That's absurd. What I'm saying is that he is the bright spark that is maybe taking the attention away from how much of a sort of gradual. I keep I'm trying to find other words than malaise and lethargy, right? But ultimately,
decline,
the slump or whatever you want to call it. DAIZEN'S electric form since it has coincided with Celtic's kind of dip in form. He's get better and better as Celtic have just gradually started faltering and dropping results here and there. So he's been the one bright spark that's maybe been taking the shine, or rather taking the attention away from how it's been getting. But my main problem with this is not individual players as such. That'll come. I do have a problem with individual players, but what I mean is my main problem is that, see all this stuff we're saying about how, yeah, they've played a lot of football, the eyes come off the ball, the human nature would suggest that once the motivation goes, once the jeopardy goes, then the levels start to dip. My main problem is that, as I've said about 2 seasons ago, this stuff didn't used to matter. Celtic were just a focused winning machine at all times. We never used to talk about...
this conversation wouldn't even be happening.
No, we never used to talk about these dips happening until the league was literally won. See, when there's like 4 games to go and the league is completely sealed, you can play whatever team you want, turning hilarious results away to Hibs or whatever it was, I can't remember, but lost at Ibrox under Ange as well. And this is not an Ange and Brendan thing. I want to be clear about that. It might sound like I'm saying, well, it wouldn't be happening under Ange Postecoglou's work. That's not my point. It's just that for whatever reason, we have arrived at a point where we are now considering the various excuses and reasons as to why Celtic have taken a complete dive. And I know that people will be watching or listening to that thinking, well, it's not been all bad. There have been results in here. I know that's because that's how football works. It kind of ebbs and flows. It goes up and down. But I'm talking about zooming out from over the bigger picture from January, just losing far too many games and turning in too many substandard performances. So my main problem with it is that it has set in and we're looking for the reasons rather than saying, well, this didn't used to happen. This was never a factor before. And I don't know what it is. And Brendan Rodgers is absolutely right to point to mentality and things. But what I would say is that just because he's the guy saying it doesn't mean that he is free from the criticism of this as well, because I think we're talking about players getting an awful lot of money. I don't want to reduce it to that, but ultimately, if it's part of the conversation, Brendan Rodgers has paid an extraordinary amount of money for Scottish football, and he is in charge of building a culture at the football club where this shouldn't set in. I'm not saying he's got a magic wand and if it starts to rot, he can just wave it and that's everything fine. It will take work. What I'm left thinking is that if this is the way it's going to go, we need new ideas somewhere. Where that comes, I'm not sure, whether it's a recruitment thing, but we've had several problems with that before. Whether it's the CEO, whether we need better ideas from the top.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, but again, we brought that up after the January window and people reacted to that as if it was outright head loss. No, we can't do that, we're heading for a chair, we can't get rid of the CEO. So if you're not willing to entertain any of these ideas, where does it come from? Do we get rid of coaching staff? Not necessarily against that either, because they've been there a very long time. Clubs should be able to see stuff like this coming, see the end of a cycle and react to it rather than wait until the wheels come off and then respond to it. So I'm willing to entertain a lot of these conversations. Again, my point, I want to be absolutely clear about this. My point is not that this is a crisis, we need to rip things up and start again and baby out with the bathwater stuff. But to me, it's fairly clear that for whatever reason, this team has lost its spark and its desire. And Brendan Rodgers is telling us that. He's not saying it in exactly those words, but he is, between the lines, he is exactly saying that. So whether it's just the team coming to the end of its natural cycle and we need to revamp it and move ahead, again, do we need to spend another 30 or 40 million pound in players so that we can get a half decent performance against St Johnstone? Unclear.
I think that there is I think this team's probably coming to the end of the cycle. I'm not sure though that this is necessarily the indicator of that, this performance. But I do think that there is an overall mentality problem insofar as when you think the competition's done, you think the job's done, and that's just not the case at Celtic. And I think it's too hard to fight against. And I do think there are some players, and there's players like AJ. I'm surprised at seeing how poorly he's performed recently. Cameron Carter-Vickers has been getting into more bother in the last couple of weeks than he has in his whole Celtic career. That to me, things like that are a worry. The biggest worry for me though is, how do you change it? Because as you're saying, you don't need to necessarily get rid of all the players, right? But I think there's an element of this team rather that has reached the end of its cycle. And you look at Brendan Rodgers' squad, and most of his players, most of the best players he's got are Ange's players. Or the players that were signed under Ange Postecoglou. You look at how the transfer system unfolds, and you see it moves like treacle. It's so slow, and we've had so many mistakes. We're 4 windows in. Brendan's had 4 full windows now, and he's managed to get through the door one player that starts every week, more or less, give or take. Well, Kasper Schmeichel as well. So you just think, right, okay, so maybe transfers is no going to. Maybe transfers isn't the answer.
On that, is that a recruitment problem though? Because it's not really the recruitment team's fault that Maeda, Trusty is coming and going now. Bernardo, none of these players start. They were all bought for Brendan Rodgers at Brendan Rodgers, presumably his demand. All these players were brought in,
some of them,
and none of them have made a significant impact. Well, I'm talking broadly here. If you're talking about the first team, Maeda hasn't really troubled that much recently. But Engels, I think you're right. Engels is the only one who probably starts all the time. But then you look at a general Brendan Rodgers team. You look at Schmeichel, Schlupp, Trusty, Engels, Bernardo sometimes. Jota, I know he was an Ange signing, but Brendan Rodgers wanted him to come back and
six or seven of them that started are all guys that have come in at the start of the season.
So I know that he's originally an Ange player, but
he played Scales a lot before Trusty.
Yeah.
He played Greg Taylor a lot before Schlupp arrived. I know these guys started. Well, I suppose what I'm reluctant to do is start this big global discussion about transfers and the board and all that, and focus more on what's going on in the last couple of months. But it's difficult to discuss that, Melee, because then you go, right, how do you change it? Don't know, because Brendan Rodgers seems like he's out of ideas. And
if I'm looking at that and look, players are getting too comfortable. Right, okay. Sinisalo was in goal. Schlupp at left back. He came in the January. Trusty at centre half. We had Engels who came at the start of the season. Kuhn came last summer. Jota's just arrived. That's a lot. What's it, 6 or 7 players that are just only in the door, and they're too comfortable here. So there is.
It's a cultural thing.
It's a cultural thing, and look, the players and the manager build on that. Brendan Rodgers, it's always talking about the culture. You come to your work, you don't play for Celtic until you get there. We've sat here over the years and talked about players coming on and I gives everything. It's not enough, and now we're sitting here meant to accept that even that isn't what we're getting from these players. That's not enough. And what you said about Alistair Johnston, it was down the right hand side, right in front of us. We were in about the second row on that side, and I can't remember the exact incident, but it was one of many where an overhit pass, I think it was Hatate to Yang or something, it was an overhit pass that trickled out for a by kick, and Alistair Johnston, the crowd were like, honestly, I was raging at it. It was a simple pass, and Johnston just looks over and goes, calm down. And I looked up, it was like 70 odd minutes on the clock, and we've barely had a shot on target against the bottom of the league team, and I'm being told by somebody to calm down, even though this is a recurring theme that we're seeing from this Celtic team, that it is passive, it is slow. There are players who are just thinking, it'll be all right, we'll get the result in the next game. That's not enough, because we are building something here. Brendan Rodgers is talking about Celtic wanting to make a mark in Europe. If you're always told, play and train in how you play in a game, right? If this is how we're playing in a game, and then we're going on to play difficult opponents in the Champions League or Champions League qualifiers, you can't just turn it on, like you say, Jamie, as a tap. This is a thing that you need to build on every day. We are coming up to winning the league. Brilliant. Let's get it done, and then let's show why we're champions. But we're not even champions yet.
So there's 2 points I want to come on to, and one of them is it just the case that the league is just a lot of piss in terms of the teams that have been served up this season, and the players actually don't really need to try that hard at any point of the domestic season to progress, and then when it comes to this point in the season, then it's that even 10% decline, it ends up looking like this. But I want to just talk about a wee bit about Brendan Rodgers, and I'm not going to lay the blame at Brendan Rodgers' door entirely for this. I know that might sound counterintuitive. I think that he is a guy that can inspire a mentality. We've seen that this season, but I think one thing that's happened is this has just gotten too far through the squad.
Yeah,
I think there's too many players been here for too long. One too much. No, they don't need to apply themselves. No, there's no real consequences, and they'll probably get a move anyway. And I think that's applied through far too many players. And losing it in Rangers and losing it at the bottom of the league, you probably saw a wee reaction in Hearts, and then they go back, they go, all right, well, we did
second half of that game though, again, yet more absolute turgid boredom.
Aye.
Again,
but that's where I'm coming to. Just let me put a wee button on this. But part of me is also watching the football, the football that's being played, and Brendan Rodgers has long defended the way he's played football, and it must be a challenge for Brendan trying to work out a system that works in Europe, is conservative enough and keeps the ball enough and is professional and smart enough to work in Europe and get the results that we did, and then translate to being exciting, zippy, aggressive, domestic football. How do you play almost two entirely different types of football? And Gary Neville was saying something about the Manchester derby, about basically how sanitised the game is and how managed within an inch of its life these players are. And when I listened,
an astonishing rant, you might say,
an astonishing rant. And when I listened to Gary Neville, I was thinking about the Celtic game. I was thinking about that game of Perth. You're just like, a lot of these players are just the same patterns of playing. There's no dynamism. There's no aggression. There's no attacking. You see a bit from Jota. He gets on the ball, step over, takes his man on. He's the only one. There's not a lot of.
This isn't us looking at this point of the season and going, we've just not been there all season. We were playing like that. We were aggressive. We were front foot. We were competing with big European teams a couple of months ago. But the team have seemed to have switched off because, we've done all that. Champions League's done. You can probably look back and go, as soon as that Bayern Munich game was finished, that's when the decline started. There was a couple of results in there, but we could put that down to tiredness or maybe it's just the fact that we've got so many games Saturday, Tuesday. Now we're looking at Brendan Rodgers came out and said himself, you'll see the real Celtic. We've got one game a week for a while now. That gives us time in the training pitch. That gives us time to go out and do this. We're not seeing anything like that. There's guys out there, like Cameron Carr-Vickers you mentioned, getting into tussles with guys. That's nothing to do with quality. That's concentration.
Yeah.
And he's one of the guys who love him. Best defender I've seen at Celtic. Absolutely brilliant. But has he just done it at Celtic? He's completed it. He's done the league and he's just starting to... We've seen it with players. The league becomes too easy for them. They start to fall off and then there's concentration, those wee things. He's getting them involved with guys and getting pulled down and guys are turning them easily. Guys like Rio Hatate who, take him out of the team and there's nothing creative. What did he create at the weekend? He ballooned about 3 shots over the bar, or he didn't shoot. He did hit the post, but his simple passing was pathetic, absolutely pathetic. And where's he going to go after this?
See, overall, it's a very dangerous position for Celtic to get into. And I'm very keen to make it clear that this is not talk about a crisis or we've gone off the rails or the club's finished, liquidate, right?
Sorry to jump in, but it is something that we will look back on if Celtic is going wrong next season and see, we said at that point there was a malaise in there. Something wasn't done about it. We got to the end of the season. Yes. Can the players just then go, that's a new season, let's turn it on now? That's not how it works. Correct. We know that all too well.
So this is the problem. It's not about form. It's not about style of play. It's about mentality and the inability to just switch that on. I think some people maybe look at a manager, and I know I made actually a very similar point, but I don't think it's just a case of, see, the more you pay a manager, the more he is able to just hit a switch and the mentality of a squad comes back. I don't think that's possible. I think it will need worked on, or you need to basically gut it and start again. But that shouldn't be taken as some sort of wild, again, head loss or anything like that. That's necessary. That happens all the time. It happens to every team. It happens to every successful team. You have to sort of refresh every so often.
Especially in Scotland, you're playing 4 games against the same team.
Yeah, exactly. And new impetus is needed, because if this is allowed to continue, then it does risk damaging next season as well. If you think, right, it's just a case of getting them a rest and they'll be fine next year, maybe that is the case. I don't know. Brendan Rodgers is better placed than I am to gauge that. But if it's allowed to carry on into next season, that's when I would worry about things like Europe and all that. And if you're saying it's fine because we're going to win a treble, it's almost like it's making the same point in a different way. Ultimately, the end result is a squad that are capable of chucking it when it's no necessarily on the line.
They can chuck it when things are going okay.
Yeah.
What happens when things go wrong?
That's it. So that's my whole point, is the mentality is a dangerous thing or to go in a squad. And the other thing as well, I mean, again, we're talking a lot about the fan experience. Celtic in the very near future are about to put their hand out to me for the guts of more than £700, right? So if
big old increase coming for us.
If rumours are to be believed, if some online chat is to be believed, that it's going to be an increase, right? So 700 odd quid for a season ticket. Bearing in mind, you joked earlier, Jamie, you don't get a rebate if the league's over. nor do you get any kind of rebate, nor do you get any negotiation if by January they've downed tools and just sort of rolled over the line. Again, I'm not saying that me paying my money entitles me to any sort of level of performance and any of that sort of quite tiresome juvenile pish about how you expect the team to win 5-0 every game. None of that at all. What I want is a base level of professionalism and attitude from the team that I'm helping support, right? So that's what I want from a supporter's perspective. There is a positive spin to be put on it in that we're quite lucky, or not lucky actually. Celtic have worked their way into a position where it's not really going to matter that much tangibly in terms of success and trophies, right? Unless we fail in the Scottish Cup, we don't know that yet, right? But we have gotten to a point where it's not going to really matter that much, and this is an opportunity to recognise that and fix it for next season. It's not going to have all that huge an impact, but that's the key, and that's where Celtic are not always the best at recognising what's going wrong.
Proactive, are we?
Yeah, so it's not really about waiting until things go completely off the rails and then just panicking and then talking about for 6 months about what we need to do, what we need to change this. This is an opportunity to just sort of reset the club and have fresher ideas as we approach next season, because I think that's direly needed.
If it is a case of the players have downed tools because they think that the league's more or less won and they don't need to apply themselves, that's an easy fix. It really is an easy fix. It is sitting down with the players and saying, get a grip of yourself.
Yeah.
Honestly, like, you've got however many 6 games left in the league or however many games left. Don't come back here without giving it all. I don't care what happens. This is as an absolute minimum. And if players need dropped, James Forrest starts next week instead of Kuhn.
Yes.
If these changes need to be made, go out and play players that are willing to play the way you want them to play and apply themselves. If it's just a case of that, oh, come on, Gaffer, the league's been tied up since... and you know what? Maybe the players put their hands up and they go, do you know what? You're all right. You know what I mean? We have been slacking a wee bit. We've not been really taking care and not been applying ourselves the way we should. But do you know what? You're bang on. The fans are pissed off. We've lost the game against the bottom. That is a bit of a wake-up call. We'll tighten our laces and buck up our ideas for the rest of the season. That's an easy fix. But see if it's a case of Brendan Rodgers going to the board going, half my team can't be arsed being here anymore. They feel like they've seen it and done it. We're trying to compete in a league where we've all seen behind the curtain. We all know this league's rubbish. We need fresh bodies in here, fresh ideas, fresh enthusiasm. You need to go and get me 5 players in the summer. Wow. Then you're like, nah, we have got a serious worry for next season. So my hope is that it's just a case of, you know, sometimes you're just like, do you know what, I have been slack. You're right, I have been slacking off a wee bit and we need to take care of it. But is it just a case, Stephen, that do we need to face facts? Maybe the bigger picture here is this league's just too easy. Maybe a treble just isn't what it used to be.
I think that's fairly undoubted because it doesn't really feel like it. I'm not talking for everyone, but I think that the general vibe I've gotten from both the squad and, again, just taking the general temperature is that we'll win the treble, it's fine. But I'm not saying anyone's saying it's in the bag by any means, but there has been a feeling that it's going to be just a case of turning up this season and we'll win another treble. And that's also quite a dangerous thing to do as well. And that's what kind of where I was going when I'm talking about the season ticket stuff. So you're going to guarantee me, see, from August to December, we'll absolutely hammer right into this and we'll be brilliant. But from January onwards, we'll be quite poor. But you do run the risk of doing exactly what you've described there and diminishing what should be an incredible achievement of winning a treble. If you start to give the impression that the only reason we've won this treble is because the rest of the league is absolutely pathetic and they can't possibly challenge, then where are we going here? I'm not saying that's what happened. What I'm saying, again, I'm projecting into the future. If it really is true, and I really hate having used the term down tools because I think it sounds so harsh.
But I do know how you fix that.
Yeah, but see, just to sort of slightly tweak that, I don't think players have downed tools. I don't think they're trying to force moves. What I said at the top of this was that the spark just seems to have gone, and even if your overall level of mentality or however you want to measure it drops like 10%, 5% or something like that, it can make a huge difference to your overall performance,
especially if it's more than one person.
If it's in enough players at the same time, yeah.
So you fix that by having quicker squad turnarounds. You don't have players hanging about for 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
The ones you identify in your squad, you go, him, he's a long-termer. Him, he's a long-termer. This guy here, 2 seasons max, then we need to move him on because he's going to get bored. We need to, and that's kind of where Celtic need to be a bit agile with it.
What Ange spoke about, wasn't it?
And that's what Ange spoke about, and I do think that's the problem we find ourselves in. It's not a massive problem. Look, I don't think that this Celtic team, as you say, it's not like, oh, we need to sell half our squad because of the way they've been performing the last couple of weeks. We need to get rid of the manager because of the way the last couple of weeks is going. I don't think it's that, but I do think it would be healthy for Celtic to have a major squad refresh in the summer, if possible. But again, moving on from that point, we know that that's almost impossible under the current transfer system. So I don't even want to.
The 31st of January.
Yeah, I don't even want to go over that again.
It shouldn't be, but so if you were to sell Carter Vickers and Rio Hatate in the summer, probably 2 players that have been there and done it and maybe just do need a wee refresh. Obviously, I'd be disappointed to see them go, but you probably bring in good money for them and then you reinvest it like we did with the Matt O'Reilly money. But the problem with Celtic, as always, is that transfer activity, isn't it? Because for me, it looks like this Celtic team, if they were to sell Carter Vickers and Hatate, for example, all it takes is the Carter Vickers replacement to be, it's going to be impossible to replace him. But if we've signed somebody and they're no good, then you're looking at Trusty and a guy who's no very good. Then you replace Hatate and the guy doesn't quite work out. That's on top of this team that have got a weak mentality going into next season. We've already mentioned how poor the league is. So if Rangers get a grip and can beat the other teams, it's a title race because that's what this league is. It will come down to, like last season, it came down to the 4 games against them. We didn't lose any of them. We won the league by 8 points. If this happens next season and these players think they can afford to take a game off, we have a bad transfer window in the summer. We've seen it all before.
Well, it's weird to say this, but we are heading, by the looks of it, to a very unremarkable treble, and people hate hearing it. But you have to. This thing about trebles becoming regular started under Brendan Rodgers, so he kind of made a rod for his own back here by introducing this period of absolutely wild success for the club.
But you can attribute different things to each treble. An invincible treble, the first ever double treble. Neil Lennon came in and won that treble. Then we got a quadruple treble. That's nuts. And then Ange wins the treble after coming in and getting his back from after the COVID season, going a double and into a treble. This one, it's just a treble.
Yeah, Ange's seasons and Brenda's seasons are quite similar. You know, winning the double, then winning the treble after it. By the looks of it, we're sitting here saying it as if
Ange's team steamrolled to that treble, but didn't they?
Yeah, and that's the difference. So I think it seems quite counterintuitive to say, it's quite a sort of a stumbling our way towards a treble. It sounds like you're not really appreciating the effort. But that's because when you're watching the games, frankly, it doesn't look like it's taking a lot of effort.
No, and again, this is what we're dealing with after January here is 14 points dropped in a few weeks, which is really, that's quite a lot for
away form's terrible.
Yeah, away form's dismal, not keeping clean sheets away from home either. Ibrox is going to be some laughing at. It's going to be a team that can't win at home versus a team that can't win away. 2 idiots fighting the worst fight you've ever seen. So that's going to be an interesting game.
Ironically, us and Rangers seem to have a similar problem now. Whereas anytime there's a big game, the players are all hyped and can get up for it. Anytime there's a domestic game, they kind of can't be asked.
Loath as I am to give him credit or agree with him, Barry Ferguson did say that. He said it's easy to get up for European games and derbies and everything. It's this stuff that the players are failing at. This isn't a Rangers team, etc., etc. And here I'm laughing at that, and here I am 48 hours later going, do you know what, you actually got a point there.
You'll be doing Burger King mukbangs on 20-minute time soon.
Definitely. But again, this is not, I'm trying not to get carried away because no, it really isn't that big a deal as long as Celtic are proactive about fixing whatever it is. As long as Brendan Rodgers fixes it, or you know, even if Brendan Rodgers, I'm not calling to sack the manager here at all. I'm not. But you could frame it 2 ways. If you were to ask me, do you want Brendan Rodgers sacked? I'd say no. But if you were to ask me, do you want a fresh move in the summer? Brendan Rodgers is willing to kind of mutually go and bring in someone else and we're going to revamp the club. I'd say, I'd think about it.
That's what I was going to come on to there. That kind of has to happen for me. So between now and the end of the season, Brendan Rodgers either has to sign a new deal or I don't want to go into next season. Or are we going to give him money if he's not going to be here this time next year? Brendan Rodgers into the last year of his contract. Then if we're struggling in January, we'll not bring in players like the last time when he was leaving. We brought in 4 or 5 loan players. Or we don't want to give. This is the problem with Celtic and their structure. Their structure is Brendan Rodgers. There should be a director of football saying, this is a signing we are making for the long term of Celtic. This isn't a Brendan Rodgers signing. We're not going to give Brendan Rodgers £6-7 million if he's going to leave in the summer. The signing should be a Celtic signing that you see beyond Brendan Rodgers, but Celtic don't have that. If we go into this summer in limbo where they're going, do we give this guy money? We have a bad transfer window. Brendan Rodgers leaving at the end of the season. You can see how it easily can turn if Celtic don't get this mentality right now.
That's a whole nother problem.
It is. And that's kind of my point. You've made it better than I was doing there, because I wasn't talking about sacking the manager. That's absolutely not my point at all. I think it'd be absurd to sack Brendan Rodgers potentially after a treble, but it is a pressing concern now about what we do next, because if Brendan's to be believed, and there's no reason not to, if there is a mentality problem seeping into this squad, then fresh ideas are absolutely crucial here going forward, in whatever form that takes, whether it's new players, new assistant managers, new whatever it is, because everyone there's been there a long time. I am left thinking, in Brendan Rodgers' case, we all expected him to be here for 3 years because he did commit to that. On a number of occasions, he said he'll be here for the 3 years. But if there's a mentality problem at the end of season 2, is there any evidence out there for that greatly improving in season 3 of the same manager? Who knows?
I'm going to defend Brendan here, just to finish up. I'm going to defend.
I think we're having a go at him.
No.
You're not having a go, but I think this could be turned around.
Oh, aye.
This could be turned around by the next game. I think I'm prepared to have that talk about new ideas, fresh ideas. Where do we go forward? How's next season going to look? I'm prepared to have that talk when we record the last flagship of the season and we've been beaten by Rangers and this crap's continued. I think this week, for me, represents a bit of a watershed for Celtic. Loser against bottom of the league in front of 3 stands of your own fans away
in the
from
stadium
home.
That, remember, it was the angriest he'd ever been last season.
Yeah, I think it doesn't get more blatant than that. And if you're a Celtic player, we'll see who's got what it takes next week.
Cojones.
We'll see we'll see who's got it. It's not even a question of balls, because it's a question of just do your job. Do you know what I mean? Like you took a foot off the gas, right? You've managed to coast this far without really anybody noticing. You've managed to coast to this point. We've all noticed now. We've all spotted it. Every day was there. Every day there was 3 stands of Celtic supporters there. We all expect to go to Celtic Park next week and have a title party. That's not happening now. Like it's all ruined. You've ruined the birthday party.
And that's what I mean. I used words earlier like I think I said unfulfilling or hollow or something like that. And that's what I mean about how it could be if we just focused and performed to the way that we know Celtic can. Next week or this weekend coming could have been amazing.
That should have been the game we won the league, but we blew that.
And now there's a possibility that if things don't go the way we want, or things go the way we do want, actually, we could win the league without playing. And don't get me wrong.
In many ways, that would be the ideal way for this season to pan out.
And again, I want to be absolutely clear. I'm not being entitled and stamping my feet and wanting everything my own way. What I'm saying is, it could have been this, but there's something quite unsatisfying about the way the season is playing out from a certain point. This is not a condemnation of the entire season. That's again absurd, right? What I'm saying is about this certain section of the season from probably January, February onwards has left a slightly unsatisfying feeling to what should have been a glorious, triumphant run to a potential treble, and it just feels a little bit flat at the moment. And you're absolutely right, Jamie, to not let us get carried away. And I think we have had a reasonable sort of grown-up conversation, if that's even possible, in this podcast about the.
You should tell people to grow up.
about the state of Celtic at this very moment. I don't think we're getting carried away or like running our mouths and demanding things. I think we're just focusing on this little section of the season and thinking, well, that's no ideal, is it? And we can't really excuse it, because for me, in the very recent past, this stuff wasn't a factor. We were a juggernaut, a winning machine, and we were never throwing around the excuses about how we're too far ahead. How can you expect players to still be motivated? First for me, to be honest. I've never heard of such a thing. So again, we might be living in just unprecedented times with no January break, but I think I'm being charitable there. Yep. It just seems very, 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 very strange that we've arrived at this point, and it's not something you can actually point to there are a couple of players. Nicholas Kuhn's probably a good example whose overall level has dropped significantly, and even some of the more senior players we've covered, like Alistair Johnston and Cameron Carter-Vickers, haven't been anywhere near their own standard. But there's just a general ill feeling that's crept into the squad. They just don't really seem to have that sparkle about them.
Yeah.
That's a word. So yeah, it's up to Brendan Rodgers to fix it, and let's hope he can.
There you go. We've all seen it. It's time to change. Get back to work, Celtic. Start playing some football. Bust right across this line. And on that bombshell, thank you so much for watching us. Subscribe on YouTube to catch these videos every week. Support us on patreon.com/20minutetims to get extra content. See you very soon.